This is Living Power with Dan Hurst.
So, live your life out, celebrating God's victories. Openly live out your commitment. Live with integrity and honesty. And then the fourth one is, focus on your ministry. Focus on your ministry. Jesus said, you'll always have the poor with you, but you're not always going to have me. Mark recorded it a little differently. Mark interpreted it a little differently. He said, for you will always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them, but you don't always have me. Jesus' comment that the poor you always have with you was not a flippant, cavalier brush-off, by the way. I used to read that and think, wow, that was kind of rude. I mean, after all, he was in Bethany, and Bethany was one of the poorest villages around. But when you think about it, Jesus was always in poor villages. I mean, he was born in Bethlehem, one of the poorest villages. Here he is in Bethany, terribly poor village. He's from Nazareth, very poor. Jesus was always around the poor. And so for him to say something like, you always have the poor, but you don't always have me, it seemed rather rude. But what Jesus was saying really was that if you were really concerned about the poor, if you really are concerned about the poor, you could do something about it whenever you want. What he's saying is, you could do something. You're going to have the poor, and if you really were concerned about the poor, you could do something. Don't start with this, we could have sold this and done something for the poor. No, if you really wanted to do something for the poor, you could have done something for the poor. Don't play philosophical and rhetorical games. This is not your platform to espouse your political agenda. That's what Jesus was saying. This isn't about the poor, because you know it isn't about the poor. If you have the poor, and if you really wanted to do something about that, you would have done something about it. One of the biggest understatements in the history of the world is the next thing that Jesus says. And he says, you will not always have me. Yeah. As a matter of fact, in 2 weeks, Jesus would be dead. They didn't know it. He did. Now, Jesus most certainly spoke up for equality and justice. And opportunity, by the way. Equality and justice and opportunity were three things that Jesus spoke up for over and over and over again. He spoke against greed and arrogance and oppression. But he never taught that to obtain equality and justice and opportunity, we should take from the rich and give to the poor. And this idea that Robinhood was in the New Testament is just wrong. Jesus was not Robin Hood. And he didn't teach this attitude that you take from the rich and you give to the poor. Instead, what he taught was that the rich should seek to bless the poor. That's what he taught. He didn't say take it away from the rich and give it to the poor. He said you rich people should seek to bless the poor. And do that in such a way that would stir up equality and justice and opportunity. By the way, there is no real equality and justice unless there is opportunity. The three go hand in hand. Justice, equality, and opportunity. The concept just didn't register with the political leaders and many of the people of that day. And it still doesn't. I know of no government in the world, as I mentioned earlier, that I know of no government in the world that is not corrupt. Every government in the world today, as far as I can tell, has corruption in it. And I know of no nation in the world that isn't full of corrupt people. And this idea that we should take from the rich and give to the poor is not a biblical concept. It's not a Christian concept. The biblical concept is that the rich should bless the poor. It's not the government's job to bless the poor. I received a message from a contact in Venezuela last week, and he asked this question: if Jesus were here, which side would he stand for? I don't know if you've been following what's going on in Venezuela, but it's a mess down there right now. And there's rebellion going on. We're not reporting it in the States, We're not talking about it. I'm not sure why we're not talking. I'm not sure why the media really isn't talking about it. But I think mainly is because I think they're afraid that we might stir something up in America like that. And so everybody's being really hands-off on this thing. They're really afraid of it because there's this grassroots movements that said enough. Now, mind you, in Venezuela, the rich are hanging in there with the government. And the extreme poor are hanging in there because they're both basically subsidized by the government. But the middle class, the people in the middle, represented really primarily by students who have just decided that enough is enough, and if we're going to do something, we need to do something now. And so there's this rebellion that's going on in the streets, and people are being killed on both sides actually, but the government is just randomly just shooting. Reminds me a lot of what was going on back in the 60s. And so he said, if Jesus were here, which side would he stand with? And I wrote back and I said, have you ever stolen or lied or deceived anybody? You know, the things that you are rightly accusing the government of doing? Have you ever lied or stolen or deceived? Now tell me who Jesus would stand with. Jesus is not in favor of the poor over the rich. He is in favor of equality, justice, and opportunity. But we've blown that. Isaiah 53:6 says it this way, all we like sheep have gone astray. We've all turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Poor, rich, in between. We've all gone our own way. And what Jesus was teaching and what he was saying was, quit playing games. Quit playing games. You have opportunities for ministry. Don't sit there in your self-righteous way and say, we could have given this to the poor. Quit playing games. Quit coming up with excuses. Quit pretending that it's someone else's fault. Quit looking for reasons to not do what God has called you to do and even told you to do in His Word. Quit playing games. Yeah, but you don't understand. See, I'm oppressed. I'm troubled. I'm being victimized. Oh, well, let's look at the next verse in Isaiah 53:6 and 7. All we like sheep have gone astray. We've turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. But what did God say about the victims and the oppressed? He was oppressed. He was afflicted. Yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that was led to the slaughter, like a sheep that before it shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Here's the principle. Focus on your ministry, not on the crisis, not on the circumstances, not on what is going on every day and everywhere. Yes, you need to be aware of it all, but your focus needs to be on your ministry. And that will change your perspective of everything else. When your focus is on your ministry, when you know where you need to be focused and centered on, then that changes the way you look at everything else around the ministry. It changes your perspective of the circumstances. It changes the perspective of the crisis. It changes the perspective of your surroundings. When I look at my ministry through the crisis and through the circumstances, I see the ministry different. But when I look at the crisis and the ministry through the crisis and the circumstances through my ministry, I see the crisis and the circumstances differently. Refocus how you look at life, is what I'm saying. Focus on your ministry. Don't get caught up in I call them the buts. Don't get caught up in that. If you're wealthy, focus on your ministry. Are you poor? Focus on your ministry. Are you somewhere in between? Focus on your ministry. Live out your life focused on your ministry.
On behalf of Dan Hurst and the Open Class, we want to thank you for watching. We hope it was a blessing.